Hello, true crime fans. Welcome to Debate the News True Crime Edition, live on Chatter Social. I'm Adrienne Barker, joined by my wonderful co host, Joseph Lobosco. And tonight, we're exploring the baffling case of Mike Williams. Oh, a devoted young father from Florida who seemingly vanished during a duck hunting trip on Lake Seminole in the year 2000. Lake Seminole is between Florida and Georgia, so it's up north. Some of the discussion material in this episode may be disturbing or upsetting, and listener discretion is advised. Joseph and I are not attorneys, law enforcement, or forensic experts. While we research every case, this show is recorded live with little to no editing. Any statements containing factual inaccuracies are unintentional. Any individuals or parties named who have not been the victim of a crime are presumed innocent unless proven guilty. And the opinions of our guests and audience members, oh, they're their own and do not necessarily represent the views of myself, Joseph, or Debate the News.
Mike Williams, 31, left his Tallahassee home early on the morning of December 16, 2000, for a duck hunting trip on Lake Seminole and never returned. He had promised to be back by noon to celebrate his 6th wedding anniversary, but when he failed to come home, his wife Denise raised the alarm. By that evening, a search was underway at Lake Seminole. Mike's Ford Bronco and boat trailer were found at the lakeside boat ramp, and his small hunting boat was discovered drifting empty near a marshy cove. In the boat, searchers found his duck decoys and shotgun, but no signs of Mike himself. After 44 days of searching with dive teams, helicopters, and even alligator trackers, no trace of Mike was found.
In early June of 2001, a fisherman spotted a pair of waders floating in the lake. 2 days later, searchers recovered a hunting jacket containing Mike's hunting license and a small flashlight. These were Mike's belongings, but there was still no body. The discovery supported the theory that Mike had drowned and perhaps been eaten by alligators, which authorities initially accepted, given the lake's large gator population. However, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, never believed this explanation. Cheryl undertook her own crusade and wrote a letter to the Florida governor every single day for 9 years, 1,472 letters in all, each one of them urging authorities to reopen the case.
Early 2001, only 19 days after Mike vanished, Denise filed claims on his life insurance policies. By June 2001, barely half a year later, she had petitioned a court to declare Mike legally dead, and a judge granted that request in July 2001. Florida law normally requires a 5-year wait without a body, but an early death certificate was approved due to his presumed drowning. Denise ultimately collected approximately $1.75 million from 3 life insurance policies on Mike, including a $1 million policy that had been taken out just 6 months before his disappearance. That policy was written by Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. This swift and substantial insurance payout and Brian's role in arranging it later raised suspicion, but at the time, authorities in the community accepted Mike's death as a tragic accident. Cheryl Williams, however, was alarmed by these details and remained convinced that her son's death was no accident.
So in 2004, thanks to Cheryl's campaigning, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement quietly reopened the case. And by 2010, Mike's disappearance was officially deemed a suspicious death. Investigators soon uncovered a web of betrayal. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester, they'd been carrying on a secret affair since 1997. And Brian later testified that they wanted to be together. But Denise, she refused to divorce Mike. She cited her religious beliefs and not wanting to share custody of her daughter. The lovers began plotting. And at one point, they even discussed staging a boating accident to kill both Mike and Brian's wife. But Brian wouldn't go through with that plan. And instead, they decided that Brian would take Mike on a hunting trip and make sure Mike never came home. A plan they ultimately carried out. On the morning of December 16, 2000, He met Mike for a pre dawn duck hunt on Lake Seminole. And once they were out in the water, Brian suddenly pushed Mike overboard. And Mike, weighed down by heavy chest waders and a jacket, struggled to stay afloat and yelled for help. And then Brian pulled out a shotgun and shot Mike in the head, killing his 31-year-old best friend. He then hauled Mike's body back into the boat and returned to shore with it hidden in his SUV. And then to cover up the crime, Brian staged the scene to look like a boating accident. He left Mike's boat drifting on the lake and buried Mike's body in the mud near a small lake called Carr Lake. And that very evening, Brian even joined the search party, pretending to look for his missing friend.
In the years following Mike's murder, Denise and Brian appeared to get away with it. Everyone assumed Mike's death was a tragic accident. Denise collected the insurance money, and eventually she and Brian began seeing each other openly. They married in 2005, 5 years after Mike's death. In private, the pair had vowed never to speak about what really happened. They believed that as long as both of them stayed silent, nobody would ever find out the truth. And for over a decade, their dark secret held. However, the marriage eventually fell apart. They separated in 2012, and by 2015, Denise had filed for divorce. Brian grew desperate at the prospect of losing Denise and feared that if the relationship ended, she might break their pact.
On August 5th, 2016, Brian Winchester ambushed Denise with a gun as she was getting into her car after work. He threatened her, but Denise managed to calm him down and escaped unharmed. Then she drove straight to the police. Brian was arrested and charged with kidnapping and other offenses. So, this incident prompted investigators to take a fresh look at Mike's cold case. So, now with Brian in custody and facing a potential life sentence, authorities press both him and Denise for answers. Denise remained silent and stuck to her story that Mike's death was an accident. Brian, however, he chose to save himself. And in late 2017, as his kidnapping trial approached, Brian struck a deal with prosecutors and he agreed to confess everything he knew about Mike's disappearance and murder and to testify against Denise. And in return, the state would not charge him in Mike's murder and would not seek a life sentence for the kidnapping. It was a controversial deal, but it finally allowed the truth to emerge.
In October 2017, Brian Winchester followed through on his deal and revealed the full truth. He confessed to murdering Mike and detailed the entire conspiracy with Denise. He also led police to Mike's remains. Acting on Brian's information, investigators searched a remote property in northern Leon County owned by Brian's family. There, in the mud near Carr Lake, they unearthed Mike Williams' body. Even after 17 years, significant evidence remained. Mike's skeletal remains and personal items, including Mike's wedding ring and some clothing fragments, were recovered from the muddy grave. Forensic experts confirmed the remains were indeed Mike's, and a medical examination determined that he had been killed by a shotgun blast to the head, not by alligators. This concrete evidence proved that Mike's death was not an accident, just as Cheryl Williams had long insisted. In December 2017, authorities publicly announced that Mike's body had been found and declared his death a homicide. In March of 2018, a grand jury indicted Denise Williams on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact in Mike's death.
She was arrested and pleaded not guilty, insisting she had no knowledge of any plan to harm her husband. The case went to trial in December of 2018 in Tallahassee. Brian Winchester testified as a prosecution's star witness. He described in detail how they plotted and carried out Mike's murder so they could be together and collect the insurance money. And prosecutors bolstered Brian's testimony with circumstantial evidence, records of the life insurance payoff, proof of the secret affair, and testimony from others, including Brian's ex wife, Kathy, who had worn a wire to help gather evidence. The defense attacked Brian's credibility. They argued that he was a liar who fabricated the story to save himself and to spite Denise for leaving him. And they pointed out that aside from Brian's own claims, there was no direct evidence that Denise masterminded the murder or was even present when it happened. Nevertheless, the circumstantial evidence against Denise, it was overwhelming.
On December 14th, 2018, the jury found Denise Williams guilty on all counts. She was convicted of first-degree murder as a co-conspirator, conspiracy, and accessory after the fact. Mike's family, who had waited 18 years for justice, wept with relief at the verdict. Cheryl Williams held up a photo of Mike and said it felt like he could, quote, finally rest in peace, end quote. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison for the murder, plus 30 years for the conspiracy and 5 years for the accessory conviction. The latter two were to be served concurrently. Meanwhile, Brian Winchester, having received immunity for the murder, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the 2016 kidnapping. It did not escape notice that the man who actually pulled the trigger would serve far less time than the wife who plotted the crime.
November of 2020, an appeals court overturned Denise's first-degree murder conviction and her automatic life sentence due to insufficient evidence that she was directly involved in the killing. However, the court upheld her convictions for conspiracy and accessory, agreeing that she had helped plot the crime and cover it up. And in September of 2021, Denise was resentenced to 30 years in prison on the conspiracy charge, and the accessory count, just so you know, was merged into it. The judge at resentencing emphasized that Denise was no mere bystander, saying she could have stopped this. And with credit for time served, Denise will remain in prison until at least the mid 2040s. Wow, 2040s. That sounds weird. Brian Winchester, by contrast, is expected to be released in the mid 2030s under his 20-year kidnapping sentence.
Now, more than 2 decades later, Mike's family must grapple with the aftermath. Mike and Denise's daughter, who was a toddler, is now an adult and allegedly still believes her mother is innocent. Yet those who fought for justice for Mike take some solace in knowing the truth about what happened to him. As Cheryl Williams said in 2021, quote, Michael has justice. I believe he can rest in peace, end quote.
And by the way, if you're listening to us on any of the podcast platforms, please note that we are live on Chatter Social. So download the app on your app store and come on in. It's Debate the News, and we do true crime Tuesdays and Thursdays nights, 7 p.m. All right, let's open this up for the discussion. So, what do you guys think about the timeline? Anything standing out?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of suspicious stuff around this entire case throughout. But what really captured my attention was the alligator theory and the fact that it seems like investigators genuinely believe that that was a plausible explanation for his disappearance. I Googled the statistics, and in the United States, every single year, there are like 10 alligator attacks on average. So I just thought that was such a preposterous idea, and I was shocked that they took that seriously.
I thought it was interesting that if it's a 125-pound person, the alligator can't eat all of you, which leaves me feeling a little better.
Hey guys, this is Mariana. Oh my God, this case is very interesting. One thing to me is that if Brian and Denise would not have a fight between each other, they would have never discovered this murder. They would have gone to the grave with their secret. It's incredible to me to think that a friend that you went to high school with, that you went to the movies, out to dinner, that you went to concerts, ended up with your wife and planned to kill you. You kill your friend, drove to your house, got in the bed, slept with your wife, pretended that you were sleeping all night. That's cold. That's really, really cold.
Yeah, Mariana, you're bringing up some good points. So stay right there. So, would you agree with me if I said that Brian was a cheater?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so what do we know about cheaters? So if you if you were going to have you're cheating on your husband with a man that is cheating on his wife, there's probably going to be somewhere in your mind you may think to yourself, oh, or maybe my mom taught me this one. If he will cheat on you, of course he's going to like cheat with other people too. I know I'm not saying that like my mama would have said it, but my point is that the reason why it fell apart, what the documentaries are saying is that he was cheating on her. He cheated on Denise, and that was the reason. And that's why he was so mad. And she found out and she wanted a divorce. So, like, karma got to them so crazy. He couldn't keep it in his pants.
Exactly. Exactly. And the other thing that stood out to me is how Denise did not want to get divorced because of the way she grew up, what people are going to think of me. But yeah, she was willing to plan all this to kill her husband. I mean, seriously? You a hypocrite. Awful. Incredibly awful. She went to jail, so she should stay there forever because that was awful, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, this was I don't even know if it was more love or money or really what that picture was, but I will say that in the documentary, I think it was the mother, but I may be wrong. Someone said that they were so happy to see her like going to jail and that she didn't do her hair. So it sounds like Denise was very careful of how she looked, and this person noticed that her hair needed a dye job and was like that made her happy, like yay, like she's gonna really suffer as she probably is, but I don't know because 'cause I've never been to jail. Alright, Joseph, do you wanna talk about, uh, like, how karma got them at the end and cheating?
I just want to say really quickly, there were some elements of his personality that this was a pattern. We talk about lack of empathy in a lot of people who commit vicious crimes like this. There was a story in the documentary told by his ex-wife that when she went into labor with their child, when her water broke, he rolled over and said, "Okay, well, why don't we just like when we wake up, we'll go to the hospital." Like he couldn't even be bothered to get out of bed and go to the hospital with his wife whose water just broke. So there was definitely a pattern of what seems to be narcissistic behavior.
No, Joseph, good point, and I mean, seriously, how first of all, how could you ever shoot anyone in the head? And Debate the News wants to make sure that if you're listening tonight, do not think that you can get away with this because one thing I love about this story is the mother and the fact that she wrote so many letters. She really needed to get to the bottom of this, and I think that's amazing. And one other thing, I did learn something. I didn't realize, Joseph, that the waders get heavy in the water and that you actually can drown with them because of that. I did not know that. Did you?
No, I did not. And I guess during the commission of the murder, he initially pushed him out of the boat, expecting those waders to fill up and I guess expecting him to drown. But he actually, in the moment, took the waders off and started taking that gear off that was sinking him. And he actually was able to swim to, I think, a tree that was overgrown in the water.
Yes. And that's why he decided to shoot him, because Mike was smart enough to think quickly and take those things off so he could swim because he was struggling. So he was like, okay, he's just going to survive this. I gotta shoot him. So that's what he did. How crazy is that?
Marianne, I'm gonna throw out a question to you and the entire room that's on the stage. How crazy is the thought that Brian and Denise could keep such a pact of silence for 17 years, knowing that person was okay to end the life of someone just because you didn't want to lose custody and you wanted some money? Do you think like a couple in love could really keep a pact like that?
No, Andrea. I think, well, obviously they did, right? But I think it goes beyond that. I think there are people that look normal in the outside, but they also psychopath. Like to me, she is not a normal woman. I mean, how can you be like worry about how you look in the outside into society and you don't want to get divorced, but you are willing to plan this event. I mean, and she didn't only plan one scenario. They did several ones until they decided that this is how they were going to do it. So they both were so sick in their mind and their head that they could think about killing someone with no feelings and keep this secret for 17 years. So to me, it goes beyond being in love with someone. Okay? Because I can love someone and all I have to do is, and if I'm married, all I have to do is just get divorced and go be with whoever I want to be. But why did I have to go beyond that and kill this person just because I don't want to get divorced? What is worse? To be a killer or to be a divorced person?
So Mariana, I thought, what an idiot she is. I mean, wouldn't she be smart enough to know, geez, if I really go to the police with this and I charge him for this, maybe he would open up his mouth. Like, was the pact like till the day we die? Or was it like, well, we'll keep this quiet until the day you kidnap me and threaten me while like, what the heck? The minute she went to the police, she opened that Pandora's box wide open.
So, to me, Adrian, based on everything I know about this case and watching the documentaries, my view is that these were two very narcissistic, selfish people who got together by bonding over drinking and partying and doing drugs. Then they bonded over their secret that they were both having an affair. Then they bonded over plotting and murdering one of their spouses. And then they remained bonded for 17 years by keeping that secret and covering it up. But the second that the two of them went against each other, that same selfish, narcissistic, toxic energy just got directed right at each other. And they wound up just taking each other out, essentially.
My grandmother always told me if someone falls in love with you like too quickly and they like, oh my God, over the hill, the same way they fall in love, the same way they will fall out of love as quick.
Interesting information. I love that. So how do cases like this affect your view on trust within families and friend circles?
Yeah, I think we see a pattern in some of our other cases where when the one parent allegedly murders the other parent, a lot of the times the children will side with the parent who's accused of the crime, no matter how much evidence there is. So I think we're seeing that in this case with the daughter. And honestly, it's none of my business, but I would just be curious to see if she has a change of heart anytime soon now that this documentary is out. I think 48 Hours did a special on it. So it's getting a lot of press and a lot of people are talking about it. So I'd be interested to see if the public outrage and commentary, if she is exposed to that, if that makes her maybe rethink it.
Joseph, you have two words in this that says unthinkable betrayal. You have to have eyes behind your head nowadays. Well, before we go, let's talk about the overturned conviction debate. So, an appeals court threw out Denise's murder conviction due to the insufficient direct evidence of her role. So, essentially, her fate had rested largely on a co conspirator's testimony. So, what does this tell you about the challenges of murder by conspiracy and the standard of evidence needed to hold someone accountable for a crime that they did not physically commit?
So I think that the appeal and just the way that they structured the trial and the charges, we see this in some cases. The prosecutors had to get kind of creative with how they were going to finally get them for this crime. And because they did that, I think ultimately they didn't just get charged with outright murder the same way as if they had discovered the body and then linked the evidence back to them organically. They had to rely on informants, they had to give immunity deals. They really needed to coax this out of them or out of certain witnesses. So I think that because they had to structure it that way, sometimes that does give defendants more grounds for appeals. And yeah, sometimes they do win because the charges sometimes aren't always exactly fitting the crime, but it's not necessarily because they're not guilty of the crime. It's just you got to convict them on what you had the evidence to convict them on.
I do have to add, though, that I think that he should not have been given total immunity to the crime. I mean, he's the one that actually did the murder. And the thought that she's doing more jail time for just conspiring doesn't sit well with me either, because I do think Yeah, maybe he should have gotten like a reduced sentence for cooperating, but I don't think since he was the one that committed the actual crime, I don't think that he should have been completely not charged with that.
I agree with you, Debbie, too, except that I wonder what they had to put on the table. Like, okay, we'll take life off the table. We'll take this off the table. Like, keep telling us the truth. And so I think with that negotiation, that's what happens. Joseph, do you agree with me, or do you think how I am? And then we'll go to you, Mariana.
No, I completely agree with all of you. It's insane that he was the one who actually calculatedly took him out there on the boat, tried to drown him, and then shot him in the face in the middle of the lake, and that he got immunity for that. I completely agree. But yeah, sometimes the prosecutors just have to work with what they have. And I guess if they felt that they couldn't crack the case without giving him that immunity, then that's what they did. But I agree. It's just crazy.
Mariana?
Yes, well, definitely agree. But one thing that comes to mind is I think they took in consideration that his mother really wanted to resolve this case, right? And wanted to know what happened to her son. And I think that he got immunity with the agreement that he will tell the whole story of what actually happened because he tells everything in detail, everything, how it happened, absolutely everything. And everything about his relationship with Denise. So I think it has a lot to do with Mike's mother wanting to know everything that happened to her son so she could have some closure.
Thanks, Mariana. Joseph, I'm thinking about it. I think if I was listening to our podcast, which honestly I think we're one of the best true crime podcasts out there, but I would want this information, so I want to just share this. So the Mr. and Mrs. Murder, produced by Plum Pictures and ABC News Studios for Hulu, was streaming July 30th. So it's available now. It delves into a 17-year mystery that we just talked about. There are interviews with friends and family of both couples, the key law enforcement officials and special agents involved in the case. It includes trial footage and the testimony. And let's just hear from Joseph his thoughts. 'Cause you said, Joseph, that you did see this on Hulu.
I did, yeah, and it was a great, documentary series. It was really well done, and I just wanted to quickly say shout out to his ex-wife. I'm forgetting her name right now, but she actually was a huge reason why this case actually got prosecuted. And she even said in the documentary that she set out almost on a mission to befriend Denise again, get close to her, gain her trust over several years in the hopes that she can actually get some information out of her. And her doing that really is part of what broke this case wide open. So shout out to her for getting justice.
Heroic. That is really an everyday hero. Well, Joseph, is it time now to say goodnight to all good company?
It is, Adrian, that concludes our deep dive into the Mike Williams case, a tragedy that unfolded in secrecy and deception, only to be unraveled by dogged perseverance and an unexpected twist. Mike Williams' murder reminds us that the dangers can sometimes come from those we trust most, and that the truth can stay buried for years before finally coming to light. Yet, as we've seen, the unwavering love of a parent like Cheryl Williams can be the force that finally cracks a cold case.
Thank you, Joseph. Nicely said, by the way. We want to thank our live audience, which you can join us, download the Chatter social app. It is amazing. And join us sharing your thoughts tonight. We had Mariana, we had Debbie, and I hope I didn't miss anyone, but I really appreciate you both for really chiming in. It makes such a difference to the show, and we just can't thank you enough. All right. So as we close out the show, we hope you come away with a deeper understanding of this case and its many, many lessons. From the importance of looking beyond easy answers to the impact one determined person can have in the pursuit of justice. Mama's rule. Thank you all for being a part of this episode of Debate the News, True Crime Edition. Stay safe. We look forward to having you with us next time. You know what? I'm going to end with this, Joseph. It's much easier to get a divorce than killing your partner. So don't kill, get the divorce. Thank you.
Absolutely, Adrienne. Good night, everyone.